Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a book that is, let's be honest, legendary for being both mind-blowingly profound and incredibly difficult, Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. But don't you worry, because we're going to climb this mountain together, step by step.
So our whole story really kicks off with a question that totally haunted the philosopher Immanuel Kant and pretty much everyone who came after him. It's this fundamental puzzle, right? We've got thoughts buzzing around in our heads, and then there's the whole world out there. How do we know they actually connect? How can we be sure that what we think the world is like is what the world is really like?
Kant's answer to this was, well, it was a little depressing. He basically argued there's this massive, incalculable gulf between our minds and actual reality. He thought of our minds as having their own built-in operating system, things like space and time, and we can only ever see the world through that filter. So the world as it appears to us, fine. But the world as it truly is, what he called the thing in itself, yeah, according to Kant, that's forever off limits.
But then along comes this brilliant young philosopher, George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. He looks at this giant gulf, and he doesn't see a dead end. He sees a challenge. He comes up with this just breathtakingly bold idea. What if there is no gulf? What if the way our minds think and the way reality is structured aren't two separate things at all? What if they're part of the exact same story? His goal was to prove that mind and world are locked together in this single, epic, unfolding drama of self-discovery.
Hegel lays out this entire adventure in the Phenomenology, which he actually calls a ladder that consciousness has to climb. So here's our game plan for today as we make that climb. First, the journey begins. Then, the shock of the other. After that, we'll see spirit on the world stage before finally reaching the summit, and then we'll wrap up with the ultimate takeaway.
Okay, let's get into it. Our journey starts at the very, very bottom of that ladder, with the simplest, most basic, and honestly, the most naive way of knowing anything you could possibly imagine.
For this adventure, let's think of consciousness as the hero of our story. And in the beginning, our hero is, well, it's young, it's super confident. It thinks knowing is the easiest thing in the world. You just open your eyes and bam, there's reality, totally pure, totally direct. No weird filters, no complex ideas, just the raw data of the world streaming right in.
So Hegel gives this first stage a name, sense certainty. It's this attempt to know something absolutely specific. Not a tree, but this tree, right here, right now. But this super simple idea falls apart almost immediately. And here's why. Try to nail down what you mean by now. Go ahead, try to write it down. By the time you do, that now is already gone. It's a then. The word now isn't a particular moment. It's a universal term you can use for any moment. Same thing with here. And just like that, consciousness learns its first tough lesson. Even just pointing at something involves using universal concepts.
And you know what? This spectacular failure reveals the very engine that's going to drive our entire journey. Hegel calls it the dialectic, and it's kind of like a three-step dance. First, consciousness comes up with a new idea about how to know things. Second, it tries that idea out, tests it against experience, and finds a contradiction. It just doesn't work. But third, and this is the absolute genius part, it doesn't just throw its hands up and quit. It creates a new, richer, more sophisticated idea that actually incorporates the truth of that earlier failure. And that right there is how we climb the ladder.
So, consciousness goes through a bunch of stages like this, trying to perceive objects, trying to understand the laws of nature, and each time its attempt fails and forces it to a higher, better understanding. But after all these trials and errors, it makes this totally radical discovery, a discovery that changes the entire direction of the quest.
It has this aha moment. It realizes that in every single attempt to know something out there in the world, it was also secretly learning about the rules and structures of its own thinking. The whole investigation of the world was actually an investigation of the self all along. The spotlight swings from the outer world to the inner world, and just like that, consciousness levels up. It becomes self-consciousness.
But look, this new self-awareness isn't all calm and meditative. Oh no, Hegel says its first form is pure desire. Think of it as this restless, consuming drive. It wants to dominate the world, to absorb it, to basically destroy anything that isn't it, so it can see itself reflected everywhere. It's that feeling of, I am the center of everything, and all this stuff exists for me.
Well, this desire-driven self slams into a wall pretty fast. You can eat all the apples you want, but an apple can't look back at you and say, yep, you exist, I see you, it can't recognize you. To be truly certain of itself, our hero needs something more. It needs to meet another self-consciousness.
And when it finally does, things get dramatic. It leads to a life-or-death struggle for recognition.
Now check out the crazy twist that happens here. The master, the one who risked it all just to be recognized, ends up with this totally hollow victory. Why? Because his recognition is coming from someone he sees as less than human, and on top of that, he becomes completely dependent on the slave for everything. But the slave, now this is where it gets interesting. The slave, by working on the world, by shaping and transforming it, starts to see their own ideas and their own power made real in the things they create. Through work, the slave achieves a real, independent self-awareness. It's an idea so powerful it would shape how people thought about work, power, and freedom for centuries to come. Okay, so here's the massive takeaway from all that. Being a self isn't some solo project you do in isolation. No way. It's forged in the fire of our interactions with others. And that realization is huge because it lifts our entire journey from the story of an individual I to the epic story of a collective we. This is a gigantic leap. We're moving beyond just one person's internal struggles. Consciousness evolves into what Hegel calls spirit, or Geist in the original German. And listen, this isn't some spooky ghost. It's the shared mind, the collective consciousness of a whole people, a culture, or even an entire period in history.
Spirit is where this whole drama of finding ourselves plays out on the grand stage of world history. Think about it. The laws of ancient Rome, the ethical life of a Greek city-state, the moral compass of the Enlightenment. For Hegel, these aren't just random things that happened. Each one is a shape of spirit, a way that we, as a whole culture, tried to understand who we are, what we value, and what it means to be free. The journey is no longer inside one person's head, it's out there, in our laws, our art, and our shared beliefs.
And this just perfectly maps out the climb we've been on. We started with the simple consciousness, a subject trying to figure out an object. Then we moved to self-consciousness, a subject bumping up against another subject. And now we've arrived at spirit, where the subject finally gets that it's a vital part of a much bigger historical we.
All right, let's head to the final stage. This is the peak of this incredible mountain we've been climbing. This is where Hegel finally, once and for all, builds that bridge across the Kantian Gulf. After this immense journey through history, through culture, religion, and art, spirit finally reaches the summit. And from this incredible vantage point, it can look back down the whole ladder it just climbed. It achieves this final, all-encompassing insight that Hegel calls absolute knowing. Now, it is absolutely crucial to get this right. Absolute knowing does not mean knowing every single fact in the universe. It's not about being omniscient. It's more like, when you finish a really complex book, and in that final chapter, you suddenly see how every single character, every setback, every little detail was totally essential to the ending. That's what this is. Spirit finally and completely understands itself. It recognizes that the whole journey, every failure, every conflict, was just its own process of becoming what it is. In this ultimate state, spirit finally gets it. The logical blueprint of reality and the blueprint of its own thinking are one and the same. The journey that started with a lonely mind trying to understand a strange, alien world ends with the profound realization that the world is the story of spirit's own journey. The bridge is built. The gulf is officially closed. So after this breathtaking, and let's be honest, pretty tough climb, what's the big takeaway? Why does this wild, nearly 200-year-old philosophical epic still matter to us today?
Well, Hegel's huge insight is that reality isn't just a pile of stuff that sits there. It's a living, breathing, rational process that's always unfolding. He shows us that we can't possibly understand ourselves as isolated little atoms. Our very identity is woven from the threads of our history and our society. And maybe the most important lesson of all, he teaches us that contradiction and failure aren't things to be afraid of. They're not mistakes. They are the very engine of all progress and deeper truth.
And all of this leaves us with one last, really provocative thought. See, Hegel's story doesn't just stop with him. It's a process that's still going on, which means that our current moment in history, with all of our unique challenges, our own conflicts, our new kinds of awareness, is just the latest shape of consciousness in this grand, unfolding story of spirit coming to know itself. And that is definitely something to think about.